But let's go on to our second to last story. Baby teachers. Babies are being recruited as what are being described as tiny teachers in a radical attempt to combat bullying. Education chiefs believe that the presence of babies will help educate children in empathy and can be used in classrooms with children as young as 4 years old. Now, primary schools in the London boroughs of Lewisham and Croydon are going to be the first ones ever to try this experiment. It's based on a scheme that's actually come here from overseas, which showed that tiny teachers help to stop older children picking on each other by showing them how to be kind and nurturing. In a second, I'll be talking to Lisa Scott-Keane, who's the assistant manager at the Preschool Learning Alliance in Lewisham, and actually she's on the line now. Lisa, hello.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
Very well. And listen, as a person, as a victim of bullying at school, secondary school, I was badly bullied for about a year. I don't know why, but it was horrible. I applaud this scheme. Does it really work?
Yep, it does. It's had fantastic results, not only in the UK, but nationally and internationally. The way that it works, I mean, maybe you wouldn't have been bullied if children in your class had this programme to begin with. I think we live in a society where empathy is really not taught. We know it's not taught. And the way that we learn that is by seeing others being empathic to other people, or maybe our parents teach us those things. But if we're losing that ability to teach our children about empathy, then they grow up without that integral building block for relating to others.
Well, let me guess how this works then, and you tell me if I've got this right. So the baby's brought into the classroom and shown to the children, usually to begin with at a very young age, just a few weeks old.
Between 2 to 4 months.
2 to 4 months, okay. So 8 weeks to 16 weeks. And the exercise, as it were, for the children, for the older children, is to read the signs coming off the baby, what it wants, what its needs are. Is that right?
Yep. So we have we use a wonderful team of volunteers across the world who will facilitate those discussions with the children. So they're asking the children to observe that baby, think about that baby's temperament, the different character traits that they might have even at that such young age, and make observations on what that baby might be feeling through all their non-verbal cues. Yep. And that in turn helps children to name some of their feelings. So it develops their emotional literacy and the recognition of how they might be feeling. Once they've recognised those non-verbal cues and they can name those, they can relate that back to themselves. So they can start to think, am I resilient, or am I persistent? If I want something, do I keep going for it? Like that baby might try and reach for a toy. Yep. They might think, do I keep going with that homework even though it's difficult? Do I keep persevering? Yes. Or do I give up on that? So they start to build their own understanding of themselves and the way that they react in the world around them. And once they've kind of understood that, then they can flip that back to themselves. They can start to think about the fact that they're not alone, that everybody has these emotions, everybody has different temperaments, everybody reacts in very different ways, and they can flip that outwards. So they can start to think about, well, if that made me feel like that, or if that's something that would make me feel sad, then maybe that would make the baby feels sad, and in turn my colleagues feel sad, my friends feel sad, those people that I might bully feel sad. So you have to, that's why we start with the baby. It's a bit of a trick really, because it will pull them in, and of course everybody loves a baby.
I think it's an incredibly clever trick, and the point is we're not talking about a theory here, which would be interesting in itself. This has been proven to work. You've seen bullying levels dropping quite dramatically in schools where this system has been put in place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been some really interesting reports from Scotland, particularly in the UK and Northern Ireland, where they're seeing the greatest impact on those children who would experience the most benefit. So those who are experiencing personal or familiar or health-related challenges, those that are displaying antisocial behaviour, or do not have those pro-social skills in place, like sharing and taking turns. So we don't specifically aim the programme at those children. No. It's an inclusive programme. We go into a class and every child in that class is encouraged to open up and have a safe space where they can explore their feelings.
And sorry to interrupt you. And am I right in thinking that this isn't just a one-off? What happens is you bring the baby at 2 months, between 2 months and 4 months, and then they come back regularly to the class, the same baby, so that the class can monitor its development?
Yep, look at their developmental milestones, think about then how things might have felt for them. So relating any of those developmental milestones. So when they try a new food, does the baby like that new food? Does it not? What are they saying? What does it feel like when you try a new food? Or what can you see mom doing or dad doing with the baby? What eye contact are they making? Do you do that? And how does that feel when people hug you? But yeah, essentially it's a 27-week program. So they have a pre-session, if you like, just with the facilitator, the volunteer.
Right.
And the following week, the baby comes in with a parent, and they look at that baby and do all those observations. And then the following week, they reflect on what they've learned in that session, what they saw, and they can build that into the curriculum. So all of that learning can extend to other things, whether it's maths or English, science, because there's a lot of neuroscience within the program. Mm-hmm. And we always talk about how brain develops and how love makes brains, and so yeah, there's lots of other links.
Yes.
It doesn't just sit alone, and that repeats itself over nine themes, if you like. So there's 27 weeks in total, and they get to see that baby 9 times. So they develop a real rapport with that child as well, and with the mother or father, and that child becomes part of their community in that school. So they might see that child years later in the playground, yes, or that child might come to their school, and they're reminded of all of those things, yes, that they knew about that baby, yes, and all the things that they learned. So, and
it just makes me think slightly sort of off piste here, but the terrible killing of Jamie Bulger by those 2 schoolboys. It just makes you wonder, doesn't it, if they had been part of that program, a program like that, years before, if they would have developed the kind of empathy which clearly they totally lacked, that it had never been taught to them. You just wonder if actually little Jamie Bulger would never have been led away by those 2, because they would have had a totally different perspective on little children.
Yeah, absolutely. And on others, I think if you look at society nowadays and our crime rates, the levels of intolerance that we have in society, the wars that we're creating, all of those things actually could be lowered or even prevented if we created more caring societies. And we seem, intent on teaching our children how to read and how to compute, but we don't teach them how to relate to each other. And Mary Gordon, who's the founder of Roots of Empathy, the organisation and the programme, said recently, if we're not teaching them to relate to each other, then what are we teaching them? Because that's the basis for empathy, really. But don't do that.
This Mary Gordon you mentioned, is she the founder of it in this country, or is she the founder of the whole thing originally?
She's the founder of the whole thing originally.
And where is she? Is she in the UK?
No, she's not. So she's in Canada. She's Canadian.
Right.
So that's where the whole of the program originated.
And how did she get the idea? Because it's as you've discussed it, it is now a fully formed, very sophisticated program. It works on so many different levels. You've explained that very articulately, if you don't mind me saying so. But obviously, everything starts as just a simple idea, the light bulb moment. What inspired her to develop this as a theme?
Yeah, I wish you could hear Mary speak, actually, because she's so inspiring. I'll try and do this justice. She started as a teacher in schools in Canada. She went on to work with very vulnerable families who were caught in cycles of, child abuse, neglect, domestic violence, all of those kind of things where the common denominator, which is what Mary recognised, is the absence of empathy, and it's from there that this kind of grew. So how can we build empathy? How can we build empathy in our adults and our children? And let's start as early as possible. Let's really prevent things getting worse. So she built the program, and it's taken a long time.
How long? When did she start it?
Well, 1996.
Right. So, well, look, when you next talk to her, would you please thank her on the Talk Radio station's behalf? Because I think this is a fantastic idea. The thing is, we all know. I mean, I've just become a grandfather again. I went to see.
Heard.
Yeah, it was great. I went to see my granddaughter and watch in Manchester 2-3 days ago. And what's fascinating, and I'm sure the kids in the class will get this, is as the baby gets older, my my stepson put it very well. You can look at a baby lying on its back at about 5 months, 6 months, wide awake, not able to talk yet, looking around, looking at the room, looking at people. And as he says, you can see them downloading. By that stage, they are downloading like Billio. They're just letting information pour in and processing it, and you can see it in their eyes. But listen, we could talk all day about this. We haven't got the time. But Lisa, that was a really interesting conversation. I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm actually going to write about it in our newspaper column and give it the best elbow I can, because I think it's wonderful. All right, it's 6:44.